everyone, and welcome to Dragon Talk. I was just in the midst of selfieing with Shelly over here. Welcome. We are back in the office. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Forever.
Yeah, and we have two great, amazing interview guests.
What a great way to come back to Dragon Talk.
Exactly.
I wasn't going to come back.
You weren't going to
No.
until I told you this morning that we were going to be talking to them.
Some contract negotiation stuff.
So we have Sarah Roman. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
And Cade Wells on the program.
Hello, y'all.
Hello.
So some of you longtime Dragon Talk listeners may remember when we spoke to Cade Wells 3 years ago.
It was just full of hope and promise.
It was I believe we called it D&D in the classroom was the topic there about how to use Dungeons & Dragons for education purposes. And we've stayed in touch with Cade. And I've been talking with him and Sarah about this initiative of getting more Dungeons & Dragons use in schools. So welcome, you guys. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you here on Dragon Talk.
Oh, yeah. Great to be here.
It's been a long time coming.
It has been a long time. So we'll get to the meat of what you guys are doing. But Sarah, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself, how you started playing Dungeons & Dragons, and how you started using it in your school in New Jersey?
Well, I have to admit, I was more of a Magic the Gathering person before all of this. So Dungeons & Dragons came really late for me. I played a little bit in college, so I was exposed to it there. But once I started using it a lot more in my classroom and figuring that this was like the way that I wanted to go, I had some of my college friends come out, we ran some sessions and everything. So I've gotten a lot more back into it. But I guess, I don't know, the whole premise is that for the 6 years of teaching that I've been doing here in New Jersey, I'm no longer a teacher, unfortunately, but during that time, I guess it was pretty much all surrounding experimental learning. So I had done a lot of stuff with like STEM initiatives, marrying, microcomputers and literature to make English more interesting. Mm-hmm. But then I really started to lean into this whole gamification bit. And that's where I ended up with Dungeons & Dragons as a way to, boost readership in the classroom and kind of give the students a new avenue in which to study and play with me.
Nice. So and you had access to a laminator.
Oh, whoa.
My sister gave me a laminator for Christmas. She had an extra one. It's like a desk laminator.
She had an extra one.
Yeah, wow. Just lying around the house.
Gee.
Yeah. Oh, well, family of teachers. And I
was just gonna
man,
say
that thing got a lot of work between laminating like cards for the students, items, things that I would hand out, gold pieces. It was nuts.
Oh, yeah, this is a good reward system, too.
Yeah. So that's all really cool. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of that because I loved the whole idea of the economy that you created in the classroom. I thought that was really, really cool. So,
how old are the students? Sorry if you said that. But.
Oh, no, I was primarily teaching 11th and 12th grades. So okay. I had the run from 15 to 18 pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good age.
Yep.
Yeah.
I imagine that's probably when a lot of them stop reading or lose interest in reading anyway. So,
yeah, absolutely.
What was talk a little bit about your experience to start. Was it, when you played in college and stuff like that, what kind of games did you end up playing?
I would say, what were they? Haphazard. A lot of rule bending, not really knowing what I was doing, especially as you guys know, if you have a DM who isn't too clear on what's going on, it's kind of like, you're sitting back, relaxing with a couple of beers, and you guys are like, yeah, I'm an elf today, kind of stuff. So it wasn't until, like I said, over the past couple years where I really started to delve into it a lot more. And one guy recently, our friend Johnny, he is such a good DM, and he really showed us, how to really play, I feel like. So I think he really boosted and helped me along as a teacher and trying to figure out what I really wanted to incorporate in the classroom.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it sounds like the sessions you're talking about within character and being an elf and having a beer, so that sounds like the sessions I would want to play.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Today I'm an elf.
Yeah, I'm an elf today.
Huh.
Yeah. Tomorrow a tabaxi. You never know. So don't say it's not really how to play. I feel like it's both ways are valid.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, Cade, we heard about your background 3 years ago, but I think it's time for a refresher. Yeah. What? When did you start playing Dungeons and Dragons?
I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 10. That puts me at a ripe 28 years of playing D&D.
So do the math, kids.
Yeah.
That's why you should play D&D.
It took me a minute to do the math. It came to me over a Christmas break. A brother's friend, my older brother's friend, had gone to private school, came home with these books, and I was always an imaginative kid, but reading wasn't ever really something that greatly interested in me. And here at 10 years old, these books met my imagination at the exact crossing point where they needed to be. And from that point on, Dungeons and Dragons became the platform for my imagination. And that's led us to this moment here today. How it got into the classroom for me was I went back to school to get my pedagogy degree, and I had already had a
What's a pedagogy degree?
Pedagogy is the art of teaching, or the study of teaching. The study of teaching and learning is called pedagogy.
Oh my God.
I've heard that word before, but I never realized that's what it was.
That is like
as.
a Jeopardy word
See?
right there.
There it is.
That's why D&D is great, because you learn new words every day.
I just learned
Very
10 plus 28 and pedagogy. My mind is just pow.
Put it on the board.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll also hear it in reference to pedagogical
Right.
study indicates.
I can hear Alex Trebek saying this word right now with his very condescending pedagogy.
So you have a degree in that? Is it a?
No, that's my English teacher degree. I also have a communication studies degree with an emphasis in directing and production management. So I started working in the news and stuff. When I came back to school, I worked at the news and did lots of independent productions. And I always had to have like 2 and 3 jobs because production work is never consistent enough, especially where I'm from.
Right.
And so I always had to have extra jobs. So I went back to get my education to go into the classroom because I felt in my heart I was going to be able to do kids a really great service and actually do some good for the world. All that stuff that teachers say at the beginning. And while I was going through my,
So sad.
it's still true. Okay, it's still true.
While consuming a lot of liquids.
Yes, sir.
Like coffee.
I don't ever trust a teacher who doesn't drink.
Coffee.
I say that about mothers too.
Irish coffee.
So as I was studying in college, I realized that all the pedagogical activities they were having a student prepare to be teachers, I had learned it all somewhere. And it was almost like a ghost in my imagination. Like, why do I know all these strategies and principles and theorems that they're talking about? Why does this all so familiar? And I was working on a campaign at the time, and I cracked open my Dungeon Master's Guide, and I was like, oh, that's where I know this all from. So I started to take all of the activities that they were asking me to do in college, for papers and the like, and I started this idea that I call Build a Heroes, where all of the metacognitive procedures that take place when you're making a character or playing an adventure are exactly what you want a student to go through in the classroom. So D&D's been a big part of my life, probably one of the biggest. I tell the kids as I'm teaching them how to use it, how to play it, that I don't even know what would have happened to me had I not found Dungeons and Dragons. And many of them, by the time the year is over, say the same thing, that, thank God for you, Mr. Wells, that you brought this into my life. Oh. So it's made a really huge difference to the way that, I see the world and I see education. And as you guys know, a lot of steam has been built, even just with the last podcast. And now Sarah and I are working together frequently, and I see a bright future.
Yeah. So, Sarah, why don't you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing now?
Well,
so much.
it is so much, and of course, like Cade laid the groundwork for all of this, and Greg, of course, you put us in contact, which thank you. But it's really been like,
molding.
It's really been this wonderful process where, we both use the game a bit differently in the classroom. Given my students, the way I approached it was I was immersing them into the book. So I was crafting campaigns directly related to the text. So they were interacting with our characters.
You'd used Beowulf as an example, or like all of English early literature. Yeah.
And of course, British literature was great for this, kind of play style. But essentially, Cade and I, we said, all right, we're doing all these things. We have all of these ideas. Why don't we put together a website? So we built it. We're basically just creating this space for teachers to talk with one another, primarily because what we're seeing is that so many teachers are out there using it in different ways. Like I said, Cade and I use it differently. Well, Cade and I used it differently from these 6 teachers out in South Dakota, who are using it differently from teachers out in Germany. So it's really put us in contact with all of these educators around the world who have these like great ideas, but just didn't really have a place to talk about it, or at least see what other people were doing. So that's our primary goal right now, is hopefully throwing in our 2 cents, updating with lessons, showing what we've done, and then giving them a forum and an avenue to share ideas and to really build off of one another, just for what works best in their rooms.
What's the name of the website?
It's teachingwithdnd.com. So DND, so as not to infringe upon you guys.
Well, also the ampersand would break your URL there too. But if you're interested at all, go check that out, because it's Teaching with D&D is I think this. I don't know. I always talk about how it's come full circle from the '80s, where it was frowned upon by those in authority figures for various reasons, and now it's encouraged. I feel like educators are using it because of all of the wonderful things that we've gotten out of the game. Just by having a good vocabulary, having a want of reading, having this creativity, having people working together on a common goal. I mean, that's 90% of the group projects you do in school is trying to get that idea across, and D&D does it so beautifully well without even making it feel like it's an assignment.
And I think
it utilizes. I'm sorry, apologize. It utilizes the specific requirements of each individual character. So each character, each person brings something to the craft. And when you utilize this properly in your classroom, you'll see the management sort of happen by itself. And I'm sure Sarah could attest that classroom management is about 75% of the battle when it comes to getting kids to learn something.
I thought that was half the battle. Wait, no, that's knowing.
Knowing
is half the battle.
And I think another great thing, while of course we're hitting on all these learning skills with the students, for us as teachers, it's almost like the content standards are inherently built in. So if you go to the website and as you're looking through any of our items, you'll notice that of course we have to add these content standards in, because as teachers we always want to correlate and make sure that we're hitting what we need to hit throughout our units and throughout the year. And when I'm sitting down and when Cade and I are talking about it, it's just so easy to pick through, the state standards and say, oh, well, we're hitting this here, and yep, they're going through text evidence here, and so forth and so forth. So it's just so ripe with information for both teachers and students. It just seems like we would be remiss if we weren't trying to use this in the classroom at this time.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So what is the community like of teachers? Like if you notice the traffic to your website's just grown, or like how are people finding out about the site and the work that you guys are doing?
From what I can tell just through website stats, it's organic. People are Googling D&D classroom, teaching with D&D, and that's awesome. Primarily why we chose that name. Lesson plans, Dungeons and Dragons. And, it's been spiking over the past 3 months that we've had it live.
It's only been up for 3 months?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
And so not too long, but and I was really hyped up about this. We had 8,600 unique visitors, which for us two people,
that seems like a lot.
Trying to work on this in our
days.
spare time. Yeah, it was a lot, and Cade, he's in the forum a lot more, so I'll let him speak to this. But we're seeing teachers from again all walks of life. A lot of middle school teachers actually who are looking for things like this. But yeah, Cade, what have you been seeing in the forums?
It's always the same thing. I know that there's all this value here, but I can't figure out how to plug it into my lesson planning sequence, and how do I break down my classroom? Yeah. How many dungeon masters do I need? How do I run the adventure? Do I DM? Am I the facilitator? All the things that you would expect a person trying to do this. You got a class of 28 kids.
Yeah.
There's the value there. It's there as a person who grew up playing D&D or who has even just been recently introduced to it. The value's there. It's pulling that value out and making it an actual classroom procedure. Kids in classrooms, everything in a classroom runs on procedure. And so if you know how a gaming environment works with 8 of your friends, you're trying to imagine what that looks like for 28 of your students. Well, It's very, very hard. The first thing you need to do is train a couple of dungeon masters, and anybody who's ever been a dungeon master will tell you that can be a very difficult learning curve. So you end up entrusting, one child to run an adventure for all the rest of the children, where they're supposed to be getting state standards that are going to help them be test ready. So these are the kinds of questions that people are asking in a string from all over the world. Switzerland, I mean, it's just all over the place. Canada,
That's crazy.
Switzerland's actually really big on game-based learning. Switzerland's one of the pioneers, actually. They have a whole school dedicated to LARPing.
What?
Pretty neat stuff.
Like a whole school dedicated to LARPing? What?
Yep, you make an avatar and you go through all your courses. It's live, like it's like LARPing, yeah. So they go from class to class and they level up their characters, and it might be Finland. You know what? It might be Finland. Finland sounds.
They're
We need to find this.
basically the same.
They,
You guys are geography teachers, right?
So the forum's been really cool. We really have, like Sarah mentioned, we've seen in all walks of life, but really it's the mechanical questions, like how do I actually put this in front of my kids in a way that's effective? So, Sarah and I have started looking at adventure modules and breaking those apart and linking state standards. But it comes down to what each teacher really wants to do, which can be very frustrating because then you're left with the whole book open to the world. You don't really even know where to begin sometimes.
Teachers want to have a guidelines of like, oh, do X, Y, and Z, and then this is how you'll have. And of course, they tweak it to their own, kind of thing. But it's like Dungeon Masters. You need to have a framework sometimes to be able to work, and so that's what you guys have been trying to provide and show.
Absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about D&D in the classroom. This is separate, different than a D&D club after school or D&D in the library. Like this is like we're actually in the class and this is being taught or a way of teaching. So what is the response when the kids come into class and they find out like how do you introduce the idea of we're going to be playing D&D as do you tell them? How do you tell them?
Well, at least and I'm sure Kate does this very differently. When I introduced this to my students, they looked at me like I had maybe 25 heads. It was.
Oh, so you were a Greek Titan.
And then they pulled out their swords.
And slew you immediately.
So when I started with them, a lot of them didn't know what it was. So just to have them go out, we did kind of a flipped classroom model. They were watching a lot of videos. We talked about Stranger Things. Of course, we had that plug in there. And just kind of getting them around to this whole fantasy idea. It took a little bit, but they were on board. And I think a big part of it was and actually a lot of students had said they were just excited that I was trying just something different. Sometimes it's just even just reaching out and saying, guys, I want to do something totally off the wall, and it might work or it might not. So they were invested in that way because they knew, like, at the end of the day, they got to play a game with me and their classmates. And in there, they were learning, but they didn't have to sit at their desks and listen to me, like, I don't know, babble about Macbeth for 45 minutes or something like that,
Yeah.
So that was really the major thing for them, that I was just trying something totally new and just being, I guess, one of those, risky teachers, right? Like, just something different.
Did you present it as like we're going to play D&D, or did you say like this is a game we're going to play?
I was like, we're going to play D&D. So I gave them the books. I know it was intimidating at first, but a big part of that, one thing I did tie was research skills to learning how to play D&D. So basic textbook reading, glossary, index. Can you understand what this textbook is saying? Can you research words you don't know? And especially since I was with honors and AP students, that was a big thing. I was going, well, what are you guys going to do in college if you can't figure out how to navigate an unfamiliar text and so forth? So
guilt is a strong motivator.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But Kate, on the other hand, I'm sure, Kate, what did you do to introduce it to your students?
It starts on day one. They walk in, they get the "This is me" slideshow, which every teacher should have. If you don't have one, you need to do that.
This photo is part of it, right?
I hope so.
yeah, it is. It's the scary wizard photo. So the kids are always afraid.
Scary wizard.
They're afraid when they see a face for the first time on whatever pops up first online, and then they get nervous, and then they find out that I'm like the literal nicest guy in the whole building, and they always say, "Damn, Mister, I was scared,"
It's
Yeah,
the
you don't have to be
beard.
scared to be a little
Beards are scary.
Yeah.
Right, Colin?
So it starts on day 2, really. They come in and take a personality test, which breaks them into a role. And I just use the role system from 4th edition D&D, which still exists really in 5th, but it has to do with the striker, well, I changed the names. It's initiator, protector, diplomat, and sage. But when you break those apart, they exist in all games and all literature and all movies of all time. So all 4 of those roles are intrinsic in humanity, and all the personality tests that I used to create it were all in 4 categories. And so you basically clumped into one of 4 categories, and I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't it be 4? And so I use that, and the kids take that test and get put into a role, and through their role, they were limited in their class selection. So, for instance, an initiator is only able to pick, from the initiator class, the striker classes, and so forth. So you kind of have to limit student choice, otherwise everything would take 10 years, as they will literally look at every single page.
Here's
trying
12
to make
classes that you have to make a choice from. Read them all now, and there'll be a test. Yeah, right. So that makes a little bit of sense.
They're not good at that. So the reasoning for that is the role system allows you to create a classroom management platform by which the students take charge of their own group. So they have really simple jobs. That's the most important reason for me to do that on day 2. So for an example, the initiator's job is to get things ready. They're that kid with high energy that you're going to know the name of on the very first day of school. The diplomat, let's move to the protector. The protector's job is to keep the peace, to solve disputes, tell his group, hey guys, chill out. You're too loud. The sage's job is to help me take roll and indicate who's gone in their group, put materials away in an orderly fashion, because the sages actually have an understanding of what that means. And the diplomat's job is to make sure that all those jobs get done. So as a way that this looks in a classroom, as an example, I have 4 groups of 8 desks in my room, and it's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, because I play a lot of Battlefield. I can say, hey Delta Company, what's your protector doing? You guys have been really loud today. And the protector says, oh, sorry, mister, I got you back. I can say, do you have my back or not? Protector says, yes, sir, I have your back. Okay, well, keep your group chill, guys. And then if I have to talk to that group again, it's not going to be to the protector. It's going to be to the diplomat at that point. I'm going to say, hey, diplomat, your protector is not doing their job. Are you going to get them to do your job or their job, or are you going to do their job for them? And so just through a couple of sentences, I don't have to get mad at a group. I don't have to yell. I don't have to, write kids up. I can simply call them out on what their job is, and these jobs are in multiple groups, right? So they all overlap. So I can simply say, hey, Alpha Company, your initiator did not put stuff away last time. The sage organized it all and put it in the bin the way it's supposed to, and you left it sitting there on the desk. You're not getting paid today, which brings me back to the classroom economy that Sarah and I both use. It's the quick feedback system is what the classroom economy is. And so in a video game, or any game really, in D&D, you want treasure, you want experience. The classroom economy correlates to that idea where if a child does what they're supposed to do, they'll get a reward, just as we do when we go to work every day. We get paid.
That might be
it's the only one is to keep the roof over the head and keep the swimming pool clean. Those are the rewards.
That's true.
So that's how it looks in my room. Now I take that role building system, the personality test and everything, and I show them the character classes and go through several slideshows where it kind of limits the choices and keeps them from having to read the whole player's handbook cover to cover. But after those initial choices are selected, then I drop that player's handbook on them. And like Sarah said, their reaction is mixed at first. They always think it's tied to a video game. That's the thing that my kids always think, is that we're gonna finish this character and log in and we're gonna go on this journey or whatever. And then you show them otherwise, and that's always a surprise to them. But even as resistant as my kids are, I teach in a Title I school in a very rough neighborhood. These kids, some of which have never read a whole book, that's really, really common where I teach. They'll crack open that hardcover with that beautiful artwork. They'll look at the table of contents, and you can sort of see the asteroids colliding in their head as they're trying to figure out, I kind of like this, but I don't know why, and I feel kind of guilty and dirty, but I want to keep turning the pages.
That's how I felt when I was reading D&D for the first time too.
So then I use that all year long. The management system ties to literally everything I do all year long. We're in the process of creating, different, like Sarah makes adventures differently than I do. But when you start with the state standard and you break that apart into an understandable teacher tool, you can deliver them whatever information you want through that modality. And engagement is, well, we said 50%. So engagement is probably 50% of all learning that happens from a student's point of view, is are they willing to actually do it? So D&D really helps with that element.
That is cool. And then Sarah, I loved the way, I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to get more details because I was an English major and theater major as well. So, Kate and I have that in common. But I loved the whole idea how you used, what was it, Defending Britain? Was that what you called it?
Oh, yeah.
Where you were using all these different older English things, and people, the students actually went on adventures to fight like Grendel's mother and things like that, right?
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah. It was, well, for my British literature course, it was a survey course. So I started with Beowulf and ended with typically Lord of the Flies.
Wow.
So we had, the major British works in there. So I had the idea where, like I had said earlier, it was immersive within the text. So the students had created characters, and this is where I was boosting reading. They had to read the text in order to know how to navigate through the campaign. So they would be in, Geatland. They would be helping Hrothgar. We're in Beowulf right now. And they had to go kill Grendel's mother. And it was akin to the text. So I did have a class who the majority of them hadn't read the whole fight with Grendel's mother, for instance, and they didn't realize they had to pick up a very specific sword, a great sword, in order to kill her. So she ended up wiping most of the class.
Nice.
Well
done.
And
Information was there. Come on.
They didn't read the secret sacred texts.
Exactly.
I got a great piggyback on that.
That idea
That's
there,
brilliant.
where then they traverse through Britain. Like they have to save the entirety of Britain, and by doing so, they're essentially like time travelers hopping from text to text. So there was an overarching story that kind of tied why they were zapping around all of these books and all of these time periods, but it just gave me an easy way to get them into the text without too much background as to why they were actually there, other than
smart.
defeating a great evil.
You
I love
gotta.
that.
There must have been such a great engagement from like, okay, you can read a book and enjoy it, and that, if you don't have a student who likes reading, that's going to be kind of hard to get across. But then here you are actually embodying it, seeing, and I'm sure you were hopefully describing, what the kind of descriptions that would be in those books, and it must have felt like, all right, we're actually experiencing these stories in a much different way, and their comprehension must have gone through the roof.
Well, I was going to add, reading their essays, like their critical analyses, like the papers I usually do at the end of Beowulf, were far better than any year I had gotten so far. So, and I do say that with...
Empirically, you can...
Emphatically saying that, yes, because even the students who maybe hadn't been so attached to the text, just by playing and listening to the commentary from their classmates and listening to me and remembering what we did in the game, even if they didn't remember it in the book, they had all of these latent ideas rolling around in their heads, and it really showed in their work, in their writing, and what they were delivering to me at the end of all of it. So, absolutely, the comprehension rose for me, I would say by tenfold. It was a lot.
And did they slay the Lord of the Flies at the end, the Beelzebub?
Well, we didn't get there, but I would hope.
Did they help Piggy find his glasses? That's all I care about.
That's not what happens to Piggy at the end. Right?
Piggy was my favorite.
Rocks fall.
My space.
Literally, rocks fall. Everyone dies.
Maybe that's why I have such a bad reaction to that.
Kate, you said you had a piggyback on that.
A piggyback.
Oh, Piggy.
Yeah, so
He's everywhere.
I actually used D&D verbatim in my third period reading intervention class, which we have every day. I'm on a block schedule, and we have 90-minute classes, and we see kids every other day, but we have one period during the day that's 45 minutes, and we see them daily. I literally just play role-playing games with these kids and mix in reading assessments, and we use a few other tools to help with reading comprehension and so forth. But what you see is, when they ask me, Mister, what happens when I die? What happens if my character dies? The first thing they always think of is respawning. Like, they think that their character's going to jump off a cliff and splatter into the bottom, and then they're just going to start at the beginning of the gate or whatever. And I tell this kid, hey, Alfredo, if you die, you got to make a new character, bro. And he's like, no way, mister. Yeah, really. And he's like, that was a lot of work. And I said, yeah, you want to make another one? He's like, no. And so everybody was kind of sharing in this sentiment. And I said, so do you now see how this character helps tie you to practical decisions in an imaginary world? And he says, yeah, nobody wants to do that again. So it's funny that I mentioned that, though, because then there are kids that say, hey, mister, can I take this book home? I want to make it just a different character just to practice, just to see if it's cooler than the one I already made. And you smile and you say, absolutely, student, here you go.
That's great.
And
I was going to say, that would backfire for someone who has like altitis and just want to make characters as all the time. That's me. So
super fun. Yeah, very effective. The kids write their stories together on a shared. I actually have them use slides so that you can have the student who's the lowest to get pictures for the text that's written by usually the dungeon master and the higher level players who are a little bit better writers. The kid who's on the bottom is going to grab pictures for the text that's being written as a recap of their adventures. So they go on the adventures and then they write them down. And so I never really would have considered that as a learning skill. Can you find a picture to match the text? I would have never thought of that as a thing until I was a teacher. And it's like, holy crap, that's actually a skill, that these kids kind of need pretty badly. So this is a group writing activity, and it's really, really neat. And then they have a product that they can remember, that class with for the rest of their life and say, hey, look what I can create. Look what I can do.
Oh, that is really
cool. So
cool.
they take that with them? It's like they create a
book of
it's a book,
adventure. Yep. It's in Google Drive, and that follows the students it follows them every year until they graduate. And I always show them how to take their school account and populate it into their private account or print it out if it's something that they want to keep as a hard copy.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love that idea.
So they're doing this. They do this throughout their time at the school. It's not just when they have you as a teacher. Or how
no, it's just when they have me. So I'll have the same kids for third period every day for pretty much the whole year. Okay. You'll have newcomers and people who leave, but in general, it's the same kids.
So a question for both of you. What do the other teachers in your school think? Are they like, this is brilliant? Or like, those teachers are crazy?
Go ahead, Sarah.
I would say there was a definite mix. You always have teachers who are not on board and not up to speed and don't want to try anything new. I think that's inherent in the system. And then you have teachers who say, you know what, Sarah, I love what you're doing. Keep doing it. It's just interesting to see what you're doing in your room because it's always a little different. I would always try for something different every year in some way. So you get support. You get support where you need it. I know my supervisor, she supported me, and I think that's usually the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have your administration backing you, if you have the support of your supervisor and they can see the good in what you're doing, it doesn't really matter what the other teachers quite think of it. I mean, I think, Kate, you would agree with that?
Yeah, the teachers that are surrounding me all took pieces of what I was doing and put it directly into their classroom almost instantly, like the classroom management system, the classroom economy, the personality test. That was all commandeered by, I want to say, 4 or 5 people. And I've given presentations here in Houston showing teachers how to use that. And they're just like, wow, that's the simplest, coolest thing, just to make things run smoother. So I haven't received very much resistance. A kind of a neat story that happened just recently is the district coordinator is the big cheese in English that oversees all of what we do here. And I gave her the Player's Handbook, the Monster's Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide as her summer reading project, and a few character sheets. And because she's always the only one who's ever said anything, but she says your numbers are always on the top of the cream here, and so I'm not really going to mix words with what you're doing in your classroom. And I said, well, if you really want to know why my numbers are so good, take a look at these 3 books and analyze what's going on here from your point of view, because she's, she knows everything about English, like literally everything about what it takes to teach English. And so now she's going through the books over the summer, and she's about to discover what I discovered when I was, 10 or 12 years old, is that this is just the most rich learning tool that you could give a child.
That's crazy. And didn't you tell me, this might have been from the last interview that we did with you, Kate, but that you had teachers walk by your classroom with all of your students, books open, poring over the players' handbooks. And one of them said, like, how did you do that? How did you get them to want to read something?
Yep, it's an absolute reality. When you start your class period, you have a warm-up, something to get the kids started so that you're not having to fight their personalities when it comes time to actually deliver them the lesson. And this was the easiest warm-up ever. Get your player's handbook, open it up to where you left off, grab your character sheet out of your folder, and continue working. But I think it's the beautiful art, and it's the design of the D&D brand is so beautiful that kind of pulls a kid in just like a video game would, you know, where each page is just like a new tab that leads them a little deeper and a little deeper into this mystery. And it's like I said before, the meteors are colliding in their head because they don't know really how to feel, but they can't seem to stop turning the pages. And so I have shared that with other teachers, and you know, they're using it how they can. You know, in English, using D&D is the easiest, but as we all know, it can be used to teach any curriculum. You just need the modality by which to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see, math, science, history,
Gym.
Get
the LARPing.
Yeah, actually, we have right from the stream of many eyes. We saw, how the athletes
fencing.
of the stunt
we used to
fighters.
have fencing classes.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So
you get points for that. Experience points for fencing class.
Hell yeah. So we
actually.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Kate.
I was just going to say, in the product that we're kind of theorizing, something that Sarah and I have talked about is a skill-based tree, so that it would be kind of like in Skyrim, where you don't necessarily start as a class. You start as a race with the personality test.
Right.
But then as you go to each class, you get experience points for bard or rogue or fighter or whatever it might be. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool to put a Fitbit on kids? And the only way they could get levels in fighter or monk through an app is to measure their Fitbit, and then they would be able to log in their hours. Or if they played a football game, they'd be able to put in the amount of time that they played football, and that would be one way that they could increase experience.
Such a great idea.
I love this.
And then we can also
yes.
track them so we know where they are at all times. Wait, hold on. That's where the idea falls apart. Darn it. But I love that, to be able to encourage actual exercise too, because that's always a big push for kids of any age as well.
Yeah.
What were you going to ask?
So we know educational benefits with D&D, but I'm curious, when you're using D&D in the classroom, are you noticing a change in how the kids are actually treating each other? And if there is there kids that normally wouldn't be interacting together are developing these friendships, and like what is that dynamic like?
Before you guys go, I do want to say I met a student today, which is the perfect example for what you guys are talking about. He came to visit the Wizard's office. His name was Jack.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, Jack. If you're listening, his name is Edward
What's up,
Longleaf. In the Twitch chat, he said he might be listening and watching. But he is a student who started his D&D club in Seaside, California, and his class. There was so many people who wanted to join the club that they had to turn, folks away. Half the school wanted to join it, and you can see him just brighten up with when he describes what he does in the Dungeons and Dragons game. And this is someone who has, learns a little bit differently. I think he has dyslexia, and the fact that he's pushing his limits to be able to read all the books and become a dungeon master and explore social cues, all the things that you get as an ancillary benefit almost from Dungeons and Dragons play. It was really great. So I was so excited to have him be like, oh, and we're going to talk to educators today on Dragon Talk, which fits exactly in your wheelhouse for what you're doing with this club, but then bringing it into the classroom itself. So yeah, have you guys seen any benefits like that in your classrooms?
Yeah, I'll jump in before Kate. I'll only talk about two things quickly because I know Kate has seen some really amazing things in his room. The first one, I remember recently during an observation, my supervisor was in there just watching my students do a group lesson. We weren't playing D&D that day, and they were working on analyzing quotes. And just natively, the students were helping, like cross-group, talking to one another, and actually staying on task and everything. And they were, working towards the greater good there, like trying to finish up for the day. And one of her comments was, she said, I don't know how you've gotten them to talk to each other like this, because the collaboration now is so rich. They feel comfortable with each other. They feel skilled. They know what the other is working towards. And I think that comfort level was huge in changing how the students converse with one another. And that's through play. That's through, them doing all sorts of crazy things and laughing together and laughing with me and just really enjoying their environment. And then the second thing was, in the same vein, I had started a D&D club, and I had 40 kids show up to start, and I was like, we got to whittle these groups down. And eventually, though, during parent-teacher conferences, I had a slew of parents come out and say, like, just thank you for creating this. My student felt alone. He didn't have that many friends. He didn't talk to a lot of people. And, now he has friends. Now he has people he wants to stay after school. He loves what he's doing. It's all he talks about at dinner kind of stuff. And that's always what you want to hear from parents. Like, no matter what you're doing, it didn't have to be D&D, but it just so happened that, these are the things that are sparking them. And as it has sparked students and, people who play this for so long. So
as it sparked us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are, of course, the biggest things. Just ease for the students, making them feel like they belong, and just really boosting that overall collaboration. But I know Cade has seen some amazing stuff in his room as well.
I'm going to try to limit the number of stories to just 2. And yeah, you know me. Pedagogically, the word that you're looking for is called soft skills. That's what they call it, soft skills.
I'm very soft-skilled.
Soft skill. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Soft skin too.
You can manage me, sir. You can manage anyone. The soft skills are the skills that actually help us succeed in life. Truly, it's the old saying: "It's not what you know, it's who you know," and that's kind of what it boils down to. Is the soft skills is your ability to work with people. So 2 stories that come to mind. A couple years ago, there was this great, sweet kid named Jimmy, and Jimmy was probably one of the smartest kids in the school, and he was just isolated. He was crying in the middle of the hallway one day, and I came up to him, and he wasn't one of my students, but I was like, "Little brother, are you okay?" And he just says, "Mister, I'm just so alone, and everybody here is so different." And he's right; they were very different than him, because he just a shining star in sort of a field of darkness. But anyway, I told him, "You're going to join my D&D club, and I'm going to have you moved into my classroom." Both of those things happened. I told the administrator, this kid needs to be in my room because he needs the older brotherly support that I give to all my kids, and he really just needs it. And so they moved him, and he joined my club. Jimmy he is a senior this year. Holy smokes, he's a senior this year, and he sent me a letter, an actual letter through interdepartment mail from the high school to the 9th grade center where I teach. It was that important to him. And Jimmy wrote me like a 3-page letter explaining how everything had happened after that moment where I found him in the hallway changed his life for the better, and now he's going to be an engineer or something, great when he leaves school, and he still plays with the D&D club that I've passed on to the high school. I gave him I gave the club next door, because 9th grade centers are separate from the high school where I teach, for sort of a spawning pool kind of concept where you get one last chance to corral them before you let them off into the wild. So I gave the club next door a few of the books, and Jimmy and others that have left my classroom continue to play today. The other story that I think
Hold on, I just want to say that is, I'm like actually tears in my eyes right now from how sweet that story is. So I just want to make sure you knew. That's
doing my work, mister.
That is so amazing.
Just even from like when you went up to him and said, "Are you okay, little brother?" Look,
Shelly's crying right now.
Turn off the feed, Pelham. The people can't see us like this.
The podcast is over.
Dragon cry.
What people need to remember about using gamification in the classroom is it's not just running a game in your classroom. It's what is it like when you're a dungeon master greeting friends who come into your house to play a game for 4 hours. It's not like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm here seeing you again." My kids come to the door, and I always got to change a dirty diaper or 2 on their way in, but ultimately they understand, because of the way that I just treat them. It's my room is a gaming environment, whether we're playing a game that day or not. My room is a gaming environment, and kids have often shaking my hand at the door saying, "Oh, thank God I'm finally home." And
that's sweet.
You talk about jerking the tears when you see this little kid who grew up in the hood who's got absolutely nothing, and he shakes your hand and pulls you in for a little hug, and he says, "Thank God I'm home. This is a long day, mister. I'm super glad to see you."
And it's something that's, I didn't even realize it, but it's something that you mentioned too, Sarah, when you were saying that, like, you're laughing with them, you're playing with the students. And that is something that's so important. I don't think a lot of maybe educators think about that, or even parents think about that. But like it's really a big part of their development to feel like they are peers in a way, right?
Yeah.
They're not just like little kids or little versions of humans that you try to ignore. Like if you're with them and engaging with them on a peer-like level, I feel like that just brings everybody up, they don't get that everywhere else. So no. I think that's a big reason why you two get the amount of tears jerked out.
Well, it happens. The other story that's of significance. I'm sorry, Sarah. I just, before I lose the train of thought.
Do it.
In Texas here, we have a really high language learner population, people who have come from Mexico or Honduras or, wherever, Spanish-speaking countries. And I had a little girl named Jo, and she was tiny and sped lep. So she had some learning difficulties with reading, and she was a language learner. So she had 2 stones against her already, and the softest spoken, quietest, shyest, sweetest little girl you've ever met in your life. and she joined the club at my invitation. I said, I think that this could be a really huge thing for you. She created an Amazon warrior, made her 6 feet tall, heavily clad in armor with a great sword. And she ended up being the brutal killer in the group. They'd be like, Joe, come help us. And she would come in and save the day and slay the enemies and just have this huge smile on her tiny little face.
Oh my God.
Well, that's a great story all by itself. Then segue to a month later when her teachers are like, she's in your D&D club, right? What did you do?
Oh.
Jo had become one of the most active participants in all of her class, had started helping other students. Her deficiencies quickly fell to the wayside, and she nearly passed. I mean, just by a question, she missed her EOC, which in 9th grade here in Texas is very, very, very difficult for a language learner by itself, let alone the SPED deficiencies. But she had become a triumph to what this can do. And she still plays with the groups next door and has a group of friends that, of course, will be with her forever, as we all know how that bond lasts for eternity.
Yeah. Wow.
That is amazing.
Right?
I love this.
Yeah.
You need to read Paul's article. Read Paul's article.
Yeah, so do you want to plug that real quick? I know the link might not be live yet, but where's that going to go?
It's not yet. It's going to be on a site called MindSHIFT, which is a subsidy of National Public Radio or National Public Broadcasting, one or the other, or both. I don't know if it's the same thing. And he came out, man, I wish I could write like this guy. I just started, you got to read the whole thing, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
Wasn't it an unbelievable article?
Yeah, I think what it's really hitting is just, there are teachers all over, and, thankfully us now being a couple of them where we're doing just, I don't know, truly wonderful things in the classroom with this as a vehicle. And I think the article really shows how, if you're putting a little bit of this work in and really trying, it's boundless what you will get back from these students.
That's super cool. So go check that out on the MindSHIFT website when it goes live. We'll of course talk about that on all of the Wizards stuff when it goes live as well. But so we mentioned learningwithdnd.com as a place to go find out more if you're interested. Where else can people find out about you guys?
Teachingwithdnd.com, just to throw that in there.
Whoops.
Sarah Martin's website.
Martin's website is learning. Yeah, my bad.
I have a Twitter account. It's not specific to Teaching with D&D. It's just my professional one, but you can follow that. I think you guys will link it, but it's _Bill Dung's roman. It's a coming of age novel name.
Very English teacher.
Very English teacher of you, yes.
Yeah. So you can follow that. I usually post updates about what we're doing, like today. I posted this on Twitter, but little things like that. But yeah, mostly just visiting the website. We set up a little Discord channel. It's quiet in there, but sometimes people post and they have some good conversations, but mostly the forum is where things are really active right now. So yeah.
Cool. Cade, what about you? Where can people find out more about you other than the places Sarah just mentioned?
Well, that would be the best place. Really, just go to Cade at teachingwithdnd.com and you can message Sarah or myself. And really, we do need to kind of steer everybody that direction. It's nice to have the personal email thing, but that's already filled with 10,000 emails from work. That website will really help Sarah and I begin to see as much need as is necessary to keep making this go, because more and more people keep joining it. And with 8,000 visitors in 90 days, we can only assume that that's going to increase exponentially. I know that she and I both have talked about wanting to have, conversations with these folks and so forth. And eventually that will happen, but there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah. I know we've only just started talking about it, but the idea of a teaching conference dedicated to some kind of a using D&D in the classroom sounds really exciting.
Be huge.
Yeah.
It'd be great. Yeah.
So go to, I'm going to get it wrong again, teachingwithdnd.com, and find out more, spread the word, and get more people on board, because I think there's a big future for using this game in the classrooms.
All I can say is that I hope that one of those 8,000 unique visitors are like future teachers for my kid.
Yeah.
He's starting kindergarten this fall. Is it too soon for D&D in the classroom at kindergarten level? When actually is the right age to introduce D&D in the classroom? Have you found a sweet spot?
I would say seventh grade.
Okay.
Maybe sixth.
That's when things start getting dicey anyway, when you're like 11, 12 years old. You need the D&D. That would help.
Getting
Yeah,
dicey.
12 years old is about the age that the cognition begins to really take place, where the child can have the metacognitive ability to understand what it is that they're reading and synthesize text and things like that. Most of my students are at about a 7th grade mentality, even though I teach 9th grade. There's a lot of catching up that happens, and I see that when I introduce them to the game. It really fills in a lot of the gaps pretty quickly. But I would say 7th grade is probably ideal. And if places have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade system for middle school, I would have no hesitation in starting at 6th grade.
Okay.
Now we do have a teacher. We have a teacher on the forum that is, Sarah, what is it, 2nd or 3rd grade or something like that?
Oh, it is. I feel like it's 3rd grade.
Wow.
But yeah, there are some teachers out there who are modifying gameplay for very young students.
Math.
And it's just,
right?
I mean, it's like,
Yep.
I am trained 7 through 12, so I can't say that I can speak to that very well, but at least we've given this person a place to talk about it with other people, you know?
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I mean, yeah, start early. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's only going to make them smarter.
exactly. Yeah. Well, great.
You know,
Thank
and
you
that
guys. Oh yeah, go ahead, Kate. One more thing.
I was just going to say part of the thing that made me want to use D&D in my classroom is one of the commonalities that I began to think about when I was in college is, what is it about my friends that made us smarter than everybody else that we know? And there was one catalyst. There was one catalyst, and that we all played D&D together. We all maintained our friendships, and it just seems like playing that game together just makes you brilliant. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it.
That's true. We're putting that on the back of the box.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thanks, you guys. I love the work you're doing.
Me too.
I want everybody to go to teachingwithdnd.com and find out more about how they can potentially do this if you're an educator, even if you're not, even if you have kids and want to point your teachers to it. I think it's a great resource. So thank you for setting it up and being in the forums and making it happen. And thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, you guys. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
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 We'll stay on the Twitches here real quick. I love them.
I love
they
them
are
so
so good.
much.
I love everything they're doing, and they say words like pedagogy and know what it means, and
Yes.
it's all because of
And
D&D.
their Twitter handles are based off of obscure literary
Literary
references.
things, exactly. They are our people.
They're so good.
I love it.
I'm so excited for Quinn to go to school.
Right?
He needs to start the D&D club.
He does. He absolutely needs to start the D&D club.
You know what I love about the D&D in schools, and Cade kind of spoke to that about the story he told about the little girl, is like there's kids who maybe are not going to excel at sports,
Right.
and they may not have the opportunity to be the big hero and stand out in a way, athletically, maybe not even academically, but D&D they get that opportunity.
You get that spotlight.
They
You
get that spotlight on them, and it kind of just breaks down all the differences between you and homecoming queen or quarterback or whatever tropes there are that exist in schools.
Yeah.
It just kind of breaks that down, and
That's
you're
true.
all just an adventuring party.
It's good stuff.
Oh, I just love it.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. Seriously,
I wanna go back to
especially
school
like
now.
coming of age stories like that one about a girl or a daughter. Just full on waterworks for me every single time now.
You can't handle that.
It's like those car commercials with like teaching your 16-year-old to drive or something like that. I'm like, no, yeah,
I can't do it.
I can't.
Well, just meeting your fan today,
Yes, exactly.
he was like a little Quentin.
He is exactly. So we got to take a short break. We are going to get right back on the horn with Elisa Teague and Emmett Fury to talk No Stone Unturned.
Okay, that's the best name ever.
It is. Yeah, exactly. And he was a really good game designer.
Emmett
as
Fury.
well. Yeah.
Jeez.
So yeah, quick break and then we'll be right back with another interview. Thank you for watching, Twitch people. We'll be back
Thank
soon.
you for watching
And
us
I hope you're there,
cry.
Edward Longleaf. We like you. All right.